Hi, everyone, and welcome to that Area Value webinar on continuous materiality assessment powered by Datamaran. So thank you for joining us today. We are going to talk a bit today about our approach to materiality assessment and how you can leverage technology to support that exercise. So before we dive in the presentation, I'd just like to take a few moments to present you our team. So I'm going to give you a brief presentation about myself as well as our talented new members. So we've been growing our client base lately, and we've been also been able to have new people joining us. So we're going to see that in a few moments with Leo and Carolien, and Donato Callas as well, which is our ESG manager. So he's actually in Milan today, but he's also supporting our efforts in the materiality assessment. So just to give you an overview of our team. So to start with myself, so for those of you who don't know me, I'm a customer success manager based in San Francisco, and as all our customer success team, our role is really to make sure that you have access to the best information to support your projects internally, so including those materiality assessments. Before joining Area Value, I was a sustainability consultant at Deloitte in Montreal. And actually, our team is also coming from other Big Four companies. So Leo from KPMG and Carolien from EY. And on that, I'm just actually going to pass it over to first Leo and then Carolien. So Leo, over to you.
Thank you, Maeva. Hello and welcome to everyone. I'm Leonardo Gutson. I'm a customer success manager for the Spanish and Latin American market based in Madrid. I joined Area Value this year to use technology and data to help customers using Datamaran, our EA business intelligence tool, to make data-driven decisions and improve the efficiency of their business. About me, I'm an accountant, graduated in Argentina at the Buenos Aires University. I started my career with KPMG in 2005, work and live in Spain as well in Latin America, and I bring close to 13 years of experience in audit, management consulting, sustainability, and governance risk and compliance across a range of industries like chemical and natural resources, financial services, public sector, and the energy sector. And then, well, welcome and enjoy this webinar by the Area Values team.
Thank you, Leo. And Carolien, if you can also present yourself.
Yes, of course. Thank you, Maeva. And what a well pronunciation of my Dutch name. But indeed, it's Carolien Gadella-van-Wersch. I'm based in the Netherlands, in Rotterdam, actually. And I'll be mainly focused on business development for Area Value in the Netherlands as well as the Nordics. Before this, indeed, I worked at EY as a senior manager for the past 10 years. And before that, I worked as a corporate responsibility manager within Nike. So I've been around in the sustainability space for the past 18 years. And I've seen the profession and actually the topic developing as well. And to me, Datamaran is a very useful platform for the next step, and definitely for companies who want to take the next step in their sustainability journey, to also come up with some objective, effect-based information. I mainly work in the CP&R sector, financial sector, but of course, then again, after having been a consultant for 10 years, I've seen most of the sectors, other sectors as well. So over to you, Maeva.
Perfect. Thank you, Leo and Carolien, for those introductions. So now we're going to move on to our agenda for today. So I'm just going to go through a quick introduction to better understand the context of this data-driven materiality assessment. Then we're going to see how our approach differs from a standard approach that you would take without technology. And then we're going to have a quick look at how you can actually customize this materiality assessment as well, looking at different frameworks and using our new function, the strategic issue radar. Then we'll do a quick conclusion and we'll have time for some questions and updates. So if you have any questions, please ask them using the Q&A button, and we'll go through that at the end of the presentation. So first, we're just going to look at what are the external factors that are basically impacting the reporting process today. So there are three main ones. So the regulations, the frameworks, as well as the overall ecosystem. So looking at the regulations first, using our Datamaran Observe module, we can see that there are today more than 3,000 regulatory initiatives, both soft and hard law, that are impacting the disclosure on ESG issues. So if we look at some statistics, we can really see that this has been increasing a lot over the last few years, and this is, also an important pressure that is put on companies to talk more and do more about those ESG topics. So if we look at, for example, between 2010 and 2016, there's been an increase of 64%. There's been a 64% increase in those regulations. And actually, among all those regulations that we track, 74% of these initiatives have a legally binding force. So it's really something that is more and more important, and that companies should focus on. So now if we look at the framework, so here I just wanted to give a quick reminder of what are the definitions given to materiality by different standards and organizations, and you probably know them. But what's also interesting is that we see that there's a converging in definitions. And actually, a few weeks ago, all those organizations, so the GRI, SASB, IR, but also accountants organizations gathered, and they actually come up with a common definition that kind of encompasses all those different organizations' definitions to have something common to work on. So the definition that they come up with is, so material information is any information which is reasonably capable of making a difference to the conclusions stakeholders may draw when reviewing related information. So again, the idea is really to report on things that are important for the shareholders and the stakeholders. So looking at actually some statistics around materiality assessments. So we've used our search module in Datamaran to look at what are the companies that talk actually about the keyword quote materiality assessment, and we can see that there's been an increase over time. So from 2010 to 2016, it's increased about tenfold. So it's really something that more and more companies are doing, just not putting all and any information that they have on ESG topics, but really focusing on what's important. Now, if we tie that to also the standards that are used to talk about materiality assessment, we can see that for GRI, SASB, IRRC, they're all increasing, although there are some differences in how many companies are using each standard, but in general, the trend is that this is increasing. Now, just also looking at the ecosystem. So it's also important to remind that we are actually working and living in a new business environment. So this is actually what we call the fourth industrial revolution. So really this generation of and access to new data and processing means that are changing the rule of business as usual. And this is applied to also materiality assessment. And in the case of the fourth industrial revolution, it is characterized by the use of artificial intelligence and big data, which is also the core of our Datamaran tool. Now, if we look at how this actually impacts businesses. So SAP has identified three main trends that support the idea that data technology is an enabler of value creation. So if we look at this first one, so there's an acceleration of the amount of data that is available and in real time. So on a daily basis, there's tons and tons of data that are generated every day. So this is also a challenge for companies to actually capture and make sense of this data. There are also more modes of consumption of data across the value chain. And finally, there's more correlation between data points in order to understand the impacts. So this also ties to a GRI quote that says that the increased automation of data will also allow extra financial information to be used in standard business processes. So back to also that point of correlations between data, using Datamaran to look at not only sustainability reports, but also financial reports and SEC findings, you can actually make the link of what are the topics that are mentioned both from a financial and non-financial standpoint and identify patterns and see how you can better integrate that into your business strategy. Talking about strategy, this is actually the vision that we have at EuroValue to support our clients, and it's going through four main phases. So the first one is really the benchmark. So how you can use Datamaran to identify good practices by peers, by sustainability leaders, and actually any other company that's included in our database of more than 7,000 companies, and how you can easily retrieve information and identify topic by topic what are companies doing and how you can adapt that to your own company. Then if we look at the next step, the materiality assessment, how to actually, again, focus on things that are really important to your business and to your industry. The next one, the integrated materiality assessment. So how to go beyond the merely ESG issues and look at also financial issues and topics that are maybe less traditional, like geopolitical risk, technological risk. So really have a broader view. And this eventually ties to the integrated process. So how to actually use this information to feed your risk management process and have an integrated view across your company of all those topics that are important to your company. So again, a quote from the GRI where they say that the extra financial data will evolve from a pure collection and disclosure to something that is more integrated and where financial and extra financial information are treated the same way. So we've actually done a quick poll before this webinar to see where you are standing and where you want to be. So if we look at which stage your organization currently is, we can see that 50% of our respondents are at the materiality assessment stage, and we have not one, but 25% at the benchmark phase, and another 25% at the integrated material assessment. So it's really diverse. And if we look at where your organization wants to be in the future, we're looking at integrated and integrated materiality assessment. So it's also this idea that it's something that's most companies are looking into having really something that is more integrated versus having sustainability or risks that are siloed in one department. Now, if we look at the second section, so really the materiality assessment, the standard approach versus powered by Datamaran. So first, why Datamaran for a materiality assessment? So we've done this quick infographic just to show how much more and you can do with much less time using Datamaran. So this statistics of an average analyst that reads 200 reports per month, for example, you can actually do that in an afternoon. So the idea is really that you can leverage big data and the power of AI technology to optimize your process. So this is also obviously applicable to your materiality assessment exercise. Now, if we look at just the standard process of a materiality assessment, and there are different methodologies, but I think that those steps that I'm going to present are kind of the basis, and we can all agree on those. So the first one, so you'll start with identifying a universe of topics. Then you'll go on to actually shortlist that whole list of topics. You may have, I don't know, 100 or 200 topics. Then you want to narrow that down to really focus and assess those topics that could be more relevant and important to your organization. Then you're going to prioritize those different topics based on the importance that are put on those topics by your different stakeholders. And finally, you're going to validate that list and prioritization internally. Now, if we look at how Datamaran can actually support each of those steps. So in the first step, we've said that we're going to identify a universe of topics. For that, you're going to look at the different standards and kind of put all those topic aspects from the different standards to have that list. We actually done that with Datamaran, and we have a preset list of topics that cover all those standards. So you already have kind of that preset list of topics that is available directly in the tool. Then you have the customized list of topics. So that's where you can use Datamaran to see what are your peers talking about, what are the sustainability leaders talking about, what's the media is also talking about, how also the regulations are impacting those topics. So you can really start to narrow down that list of topics that are interesting to prioritize actually in the third step. So once you have those topics, you can really work on to assess how those topics are important to each of your stakeholder groups. So you can also do that using, we have a built-in survey tool where you can survey internal but also external people on the topics. So there's really different ways where you can use Datamaran to inform your process and prioritize those topics. In the validation step, I would say maybe it's less involved with Datamaran, although you can use some visualizations to support that step. And finally, actually, the last step is really something that is unique to Datamaran. So this capacity to actually monitor those material topics using Datamaran and the different alerts system that we have. So regarding the regulations, the practices, and the events that are appearing in the social media or traditional media space. So if we come back just a bit and look at the prioritization and how this actually works using Datamaran. So we are going to look at different sources of documents. So it can really be the corporate reports that are based on our database. We can also look at third-party reports and really have a score associated to all and each of those sources. So, for example, we would, for investors, we would assign a 10% weight of the score to the total assessments. And again, this is just an example. I'm not saying that this is what we would do for every client. It's something that we discuss together and that we balance and that we assess based on also your priorities. So it's just an example, but it's just to give you this view of how using those different sources you can assign a weight to have a final score for your materiality assessment using those different sources. So you can really leverage different kind of sources. If you already have, for example, surveys that are done internally, then we can align those documents as well with the sources that are coming strictly from Datamaran. Now, if we look at the fifth step, the monitoring one. So just wanted to give you an overview of how you can actually monitor those material topics using the different alerts that we have available on the platform. So, and this is actually tied to what SAP called the real-time processing. So this ability to actually monitor and track information on a real-time basis to support a holistic decision-making process. So really leverage all those data that are generated on a daily basis and use that as an input to your strategy. So we are helping with that through three main alerts. So with Benchmark, you can access to reports, with Observe to regulation, and NewsFlow to the news. So we're going to go through each of these ones. So, and yeah, as a reminder, this presentation will also be available on Infobase. So here, for example, how to set it up. I'm not going to show it to you today, but you can refer to that later if you want to do that on your account. So how to actually use that alert. So with the benchmark alert, you will receive, for example, an email anytime a company that is of interest to you. So probably many peers publishes a new report. So now that you receive that alert, what do you do next? So you can actually explore this new report in Datamaran and browse the different topics that are associated to it. You can also update your benchmark analysis with those new information. You can also identify potentially new practices on those material topics. So with a new report, you can actually look at new narratives around it. What are the new things that companies are doing around those topics? And what's interesting too, you can also use the compare function to see how this actually changes from one year to another, and maybe identify emerging issues that weren't there the year before and are starting to be important for your peers, for example. So yeah, so that's for the benchmark alert. For the observe alert, when you are in your observe module and you follow some initiatives, you would receive an email of any updates of developments on that initiative. So again, what's next? What do you do once you receive that email? So you can basically go in and observe, review that initiative, and see if this has any impact on your company or on your operations. So also maybe affecting your suppliers or your customers. Identify also if there's any important tags associated to it. So for example, some of them have penalties or criminal sanctions, so you can also follow up that. You can also share that internally with your legal team or any other relevant team internally that could be interested in that initiative. So using the download button, you can share that internally. And finally, determine next steps. Is there anything if that impacts your operations? What do you do next? The last alert is the NewsFlow, and it's actually so this is part of our managed services. So that's why it's not on the front end, but you can also ask us to put news alerts on a few companies that you want to track. So you would receive an email saying, so these companies appeared in a news last week 4 times on this and this topic. So this really allows you to refine your news alerts. So have something that is more focused on the topics that you are following. So again, what you do is assess if those topics are also relevant to you. If this could be a risk or opportunity for your company. If you can also take that topic and go in Datamaran and explore a little bit more in depth this topic, if there's anything that could be interesting for your company. So yeah, using those different modules to really track those topics and understand better how this can impact your company and your strategy. So now that you've done all those steps in Datamaran, so you have your materiality assessment, probably your materiality matrix, what do you do next? So one of the first things you would probably do is adapt the report of your content. So since this also materiality definition that we have in the different standards, the objective is really to focus on what's important. So you take that materiality matrix and you look at what you should be including in your report. You can also use Datamaran to identify some narratives around those topics and maybe tweak a bit the content, identify which are the best practices, things that you want to include. Then you can also do a maturity assessment. So again, using that report exploration function, you can easily identify for the different topics, so your material topics, what are the practices out there and where you are actually on those on this spectrum of practices, and identify from a strategy standpoint where you want to be. So if you are maybe on the lower end of the spectrum and you know you want to be a leader on that topic, then you are going to check the different practices and see how you can improve and adapt some practices used by your peers to be a little bit more on the end of that spectrum. So that's another way you can use that materiality assessment, and again leverage Datamaran. So the next one, shape strategy and define a roadmap. It's also tied to that maturity assessment, and see how you can include that in your strategy and define the next steps for your company. So in these first three actions are under what we call Datamaran DIY. So those are things that you can do actually yourself. And then we have also a range of managed services where we can also help you go further with that. So we have, for example, quarterly reports. And those are just screenshots of it, but we also have access to additional data on the back end with our data scientists, and we can provide additional information. So in quarterly reports, we can have, for example, reports for board meetings, country risk reports, reports focused on the SDGs. We also produce global trends reports, industry trends reports. So again, those are reports that will help you complement your view and leverage again more data to inform your process. The next one, so once you've done that, maybe you are thinking about having a more integrated approach. So looking at an example of our client BBVA, who recently published their integrated report for 2016. So we can see that they've used different sources for their materiality analysis, and actually quite a few of them were powered by Datamaran. So using our corporate database, our regulatory database, and our capability to screen third-party reports to really inform and complement their materiality analysis with a data-driven approach and something that is more comprehensive thanks to technology. So if you want to have a more detailed look at it, I invite you to look at it online. And finally, the last step would be if you want to go through an integrated ERM process, that's also somewhere something where we can help you with. So really using that information to fit into your risk process, so through risk identification, risk assessment, risk mitigation, and risk monitoring. So it's also, again, something where Datamaran can support that strategic business process. All right, so the next section is on the framework customization. So we've done a few enhancements lately. So we've added a strategic issue radar to our benchmark module. So what we've done here, and it was actually something that was discussed a lot with our client, and we saw that there was more and more interest around, for example, the SDGs and this ability to actually map those topics against the SDGs to better understand how all those topics can be more actionable at the company level. So we've really built that tool in response to our clients' demand, and you can really customize it based on different frameworks. So you'll have some preset templates that will be available, so the SDGs, the GRI, but you can also build your own custom strategic profile if you want. So for example, here, if you look at SDG number 2, then those are the topics that we are mapping against it. You can adjust, for example, the weight if you want. Depending on your industry, some topics might be more relevant than others, so you can also play with that. So it's also really important for us that this is customizable and something that is more relevant to your own company. So that's where you would be able to play with that. And then in the benchmark module, you have a new tab where you have access to those new graphs. So I'm just going to switch and go to the benchmark actually. And so this is just an example for a beverage company. So in the strategic issue radar, we have three graphs. So the first one is the percentage of mentions. So as I mentioned, we have, so here we're looking at the SDGs just for the purpose of the presentation, but again, you can really use that for any other framework. But the percentage of mention is if for each SDG, we have different topics associated to each SDG. So what's the percentage of at least one mention of those topics per SDG? So most of the time this would be pretty high because it only looks at least one mention of each topic for that are associated to each SDG, but it gives you an overview of where where a company can look at, and going deeper, we can actually look at the average coverage graph. So here again we have different topics associated to each SDG. So this graph looks at what's the percentage of coverage of those different topics for each SDG. So for example, if in one SDG there's 4 topics associated to it, and you cover, or your peers cover only 2 of them, then it's going to be 50%. So your peers here are shown in yellow, and the scenario is actually your own company. So that's also where you can easily assess if you are disclosing more information about those topics than your peer. If we look at the coverage intensity, so this is really looking at the level of emphasis put on those different topics. So like in the benchmark, you have those different levels of emphasis, so high, medium, low, or no mention. This is an average of the level of emphasis put by the topics associated to each SDG. So again, here you have that view of what are the peers against your company doing, and again, where you can try to improve things. So for example, here, if we look at SDG 15, we can see that the peers are putting more emphasis on average than the company. So there may be something that you can look into and look at the topics. So if we click on this one, actually, for just to show you how it looks like. So if you click on one of those SDGs, you will have all the topics that are associated to it, and the level of emphasis put by those different peers on those topics. So again, it gives you an overview of where companies are putting the most emphasis on, and where there could be some opportunities or some risk if you are lagging on those topics that are highly mentioned by your peers. So so yeah, it was just to give you an overview of this new feature that we've released this week. So don't hesitate if you have more question about that offline. We'll be happy to help you on that. A quick slide of conclusions. So reminding the benefits of that data-driven approach. So first, it's really the comprehensiveness. So this ability to go through huge amount of data and huge amount of reports to inform your materiality assessment. So, you know, when I was at Deloitte, I was actually one, you know, going through all these reports and, you know, identifying for each competitors what are the different topics that are coming up in different reports. So, you know, this ability to do that in a few seconds and on a scale that is, you know, much more greater. So you can look up to, you know, we have 7,000 reports, companies, sorry, included in the database. So it's something that you can really push to the maximum and look at what are the trends on, you know, on a macro scale. The objectivity. So again, this is really taking information from the machine. So it's not an analyst saying, so this is the most important topic. It's really just coming from facts. So those are the topics that are most covered by companies. So it's really something that is based on automated screening of 50,000 corporate reports. So you know, having that objectivity in mind is also something that is more and more important today. So rapidity, so yeah, this ability to leverage the power of technology to do more in less time. So this also gives you time actually to spend on analysis and strategic thinking, and less on just the collection and compilation of data, which is often the most time-consuming part of those kinds of exercise. Timeliness. Again, this is tied to the monitoring part. So how you can track those issues on a continuous basis, thanks to the alerts, using our database that are updated on a daily basis. We are also updating our dictionary of issues. So we've recently released our enhanced ontology, so looking at new topics, So really being able to track those emerging issues on a real-time basis. Finally, flexibility. So as I just showed, using the strategic issue radar, you can really use this tool also to map that against different standards and easily do it with the automated analysis and the different graphs that we have, and be able to use that information and action it more easily. So if you're looking at what's next, so just a reminder of this spectrum of maturity. So if you've already started a materiality assessment, you can get in touch with us, and we'll see how Datamaran can help refine that. So we've done it for a few clients already. It's we can still help refine your process if it's something that you've already started. If you haven't started it yet, but you are planning to do it this year, please also get in touch with us. We can see what are the options and how we can support you in that process using that approach that I've presented. Now, if you're looking beyond the materiality assessment, if you want to go through that integrated approach, either for your materiality assessment or your ERM process, also please get in touch with us, and we can discuss more in details how we can support you with that. So now we're going to go through some questions, and Fame is also on the line. You all know Fame now, but if you have some questions, don't hesitate to type them in. We're going to take a few of them. So
yeah, thank
Fame?
you very much, Maeva.
Yeah.
Yeah, everyone, you can enter your questions through the Q&A function. So please feel free to type them in. I see one question coming in now. The question is, can we include the result of our own stakeholder consultation, or should all the data come from Datamaran?
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah. So yeah, actually, you can do a mix of both. So we can only use inputs from Datamaran, but what's also interesting is that using our tools, we can also use external data to align those different sources. So maybe from external surveys that you are doing just on a regular basis at your company. It's something also that we can include in this materiality assessment, looking at topics and patterns that are common across those different sources. So definitely it's something that we can add to the materiality assessment. The sources may not only come from Datamaran.
Thank you very much, Maeva. I see a second question coming in. How future-proof is this Datamaran approach, and where do you see this going in the future?
Good. So how future-proof? I would say it's pretty future-proof. But as I mentioned, we are updating our ontology, so the dictionary of issues that we are using to actually take into account those evolution of the risks that we see emerging. So this is also benefit of the technology and this ability to actually update it regularly, and having that capacity to make it evolve with what we see as emerging, in media, in regulations, in corporate reports. So yeah, technology makes it something that is very flexible, and we can update it quite regularly. So yeah.
Yeah, thank you very much, Maeva. Just looking at the time, it's unfortunately all the questions we can take for now. If you have any other questions, please feel free to reach out to Maeva or me via email, and we'll be happy to get back to you with an answer. So back to you, Maeva.
Thank you, Fane. All right, so just wanted to close that webinar with some some of the new Datamaran features and upcoming webinar that we're going to do. So you've probably received a newsletter informing you of the new features in Observe and in Search. So in Observe, you can now download the results of your regulatory search into an Excel workbook. So you don't need to just, for example, take a screenshot. So it's probably going to be easier for you. Observe, you can also apply the geo filters to your regulatory radar to see those initiatives for a specific year. So it allows you to scope it in a more detailed way. And also in Observe, you can focus on what are the suspended initiatives. So thanks to our great new president in the United States, some things are changing in our Observe module. So we are also taking that into account, and you can now have access to that. So that's for Observe. Now in Search, you can also now export the graphs of the statistics that you have on the right-hand side. So it's also easier for you if you want to share that, for example, instead of just doing a screenshot again, you can directly download that as a picture and easily share it. Now, upcoming webinars. So we are, I mentioned earlier, we have enhanced our ontology. So we're going to do a webinar on that to discuss it with our CTO, Jérôme Badevant, and our ESG research manager, Donato Callas. So you will be able to learn more about the enhancements that we've made and why this is also important for us to do those updates and actually to go back to the question, be future-proof to those evolutions. So the webinar will take place on May the 3rd at 3 p.m. BST. So don't hesitate if you want to participate. You have received the invitation in your email. If you haven't, let us know and we'll send it back to you. So this is the end of our webinar today. Thank you everyone for participating. Thank you again also to the team, and we'll keep in touch and let us know if there's anything you want to discuss. So thank you again, and have a good rest of the day or evening, depending on where you are. Thank you.
Thank you.